Comedian Bill Burr was venting, if you will, about the news coverage on CNN during his own podcast Monday morning. And he specifically wanted to address the fact that they keep talking about Donald Trump. He thinks that's problematic. Let's hear why.
You know, my mother-in-law comes over to help watch the kids, and she always puts on CNN. And do you know what those morons are doing? Do you know what those morons are doing? They're talking about Trump. I swear to God, I cannot believe people watch that channel. They're so dumb. It's like, do you think these people give a they want Darth Vader to come back. They want him to come back because they got nothing to talk about because it's show business, and Joe Biden is a bore. They can't bitch about him because he's wearing a blue tie. So now what do? They're going out there, they're doing what they did the first time to get this guy elected by giving him all this free coverage while they act like they allegedly don't like him. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. They're a corporate news channel, and they're treasonous, un-American pieces of just like Fox News, MSNBC, just like all of them.
All right, so obviously his focus seems to be CNN, but for the purposes of this conversation, I think we should talk about media on just a broader level, because I don't think that this is really inherent at CNN. I think you see this all over the place. And I don't agree with some of the hyperbole at the end with like they're treasonous. I'm guessing he was joking around there, but I do think there's a lot of truth in what he's saying regarding the excessive Trump coverage. But at the same time, I think that it would be wrong to believe that Trump isn't still the leader of the Republican Party. He still has an insane amount of influence and sway over them. But I do also agree that giving him a lot of coverage gives him what he wants, right? He wants to remain in the news. He wants to be at the top of mind among Republican voters.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting question. And in a minute, I'm gonna give you statistics to back up what Bill Burr is saying. So I think it's, we struggle with it every day. Let me put it that way. Do you do a Trump story or don't you do a Trump story? The guy is super relevant because he's clearly the leader of the Republican Party. He will easily win the Republican nomination if he runs, if it was held today. And he's not just a menace to society and to the country, but to our democracy. I fully believe that he's a fascist. And so in a way you gotta knock him down, but he's like that creature in the original Star Trek where if you fire your phasers at him, he only grows stronger with that negative energy. And so that's why you can agree or disagree with Bill Burr on whether to cover him, but the essence of what he's saying is definitely correct.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And he is getting, and he continues to get larger and larger. I think we got a poll on it, tyt.com/polls. We'd love to hear what you think. I'm gonna give you the stats to back up Bill Burr and the quotes in a second. But Adrienne, what do you think? What do you do with Trump in a situation like this?
No, I definitely think Burr's comments seem to be very on point, because the reality is that cable news experienced unprecedented ratings during those 4 years of absolute chaos where the American public really couldn't avoid the news cycle, and it didn't want to step away because you never knew where the next fire would pop up. And so that's how Trump got so many of us hooked. And of course, mainstream media love the ratings, and so they're willing to sacrifice our sense of peace by essentially keeping Trump relevant in the news cycle, which I think is why Fox News continues to stay on top, because they're creating all the havoc that keeps people attached and locked in. And CNN wants a little bit of that, a piece of that pie too.
Yeah, well, the Fox News part is indisputable. They are giving him positive coverage, and they're spreading his insane conspiracy theories about how the Capitol riots weren't Trump's fault, they were Biden's fault, they were the FBI's fault, etc. And he actually won some of them, at least intimated and inferred that he had won the election. So all of that, what that Fox News is doing is dangerous, and that's obvious, right? The question is the CNNs and the MSNBCs, and honestly us, we got a Trump story later in the show, because the generals were concerned that he was going to plan a coup.
Yeah.
Now, is that relevant for you to know? If we're going to go to another election with Trump, it is super relevant, right? And then this is when the news is breaking. On the other hand, when you fire at the guy, he gets stronger. So it's an unsolvable riddle. So let me give you now the quotes and stuff. Anna, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say, I don't think that the CNNs of the world are really that interested in calculating how their coverage of Trump is going to have an impact on an upcoming election or anything like that. I think Adrienne hit the nail on the head, and so did Bill Burr in mentioning the real motivation there. And the motivation is ratings. Let's keep it real, guys. Every once in a while when we do a story, and I try to keep Trump stories at a minimum, because it's not even about ooh, it's so chaotic and I want to cover it. No, I'm bored. I'm bored of Trump stories. I'm tired of them and I kind of hate them. But the thing is, at the same time, it's just take a look at how any story involving Biden does versus any story involving Trump, right? Trump stories blow up, right? And so if you want to survive as a news organization, you have to make those decisions, and it sucks. The way that news is funded sucks. And I think that that's the main driver in the stuff that ends up getting covered.
So look, both online media and traditional media get seduced by that, and they will, and almost every one of them would. Now, if they had impeached and convicted him last time, and part of that conviction was he's never allowed to run for office again, I swear to God, I'd cut every Trump story. I'd be like, he's irrelevant, let's move on with our lives, okay? And remember, we're the guys who originally tried to ban him. Remember, we wouldn't cover Trump, and then we blurred his face. This was back in 2015, et cetera, and then it didn't work. And so we had to go to covering him because the CNNs of the world were kissing his ass. And we're like, no, wait a minute, the guy's a monster. And remember, now CNN attacks him. But when he was running for president in 2016, they show empty podiums, Trump's about to speak.
Right.
I mean, CNN was the biggest fans of Donald Trump. In fact, I have evidence of that. So let's, now first, it's all about mainstream media. I'm gonna give you a quote from Leslie Moonves. He used to be the former head of CBS, and he said about this Trump phenomena, it may not be good for America, but it's damn good for CBS. I've never seen anything like this, and this is going to be a very good year for us. Sorry, it's a terrible thing to say, but bring it on, Donald. Keep going, the money's rolling in,
exactly.
And this is fun.
That's what it's about. It's about the money, it's about the ratings, and bring back the fairness doctrine. Anyway, and expand it from what it was before.
I don't agree with that, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so, but now let me give you stats. Trump received 78% of all coverage on CNN between August 24th and September 4th of 2015, okay? So that's the height of the talk of the race in 2016. They have not started voting yet. Okay, but this is when people are beginning to formulate their ideas about who they're gonna vote for. The debates have begun. There's 17 people in the race. On the Republican side alone, 17 people. But he received 78% of all the coverage on CNN. Okay, not Fox News, CNN. Then now let's continue. He also dominated evening network news coverage in the first half of 2015, despite announcing his candidacy late in this period. By November of 2015, Trump had received more evening network news coverage, 234 minutes, than the entire Democratic field. By contrast, Ted Cruz had received 7 minutes. Jeez. 234 to 7.
I don't blame them for the Ted Cruz coverage.
Right.
That was the right way.
Yeah, for real.
Okay, yeah, and by the way, if you wanted to give Ted Cruz 7 minutes and Donald Trump 9 minutes, no one cares, right. God bless, right? But 234 to 7 is, you might as well just hand election to Donald Trump. I've told you the guys this in many contexts. Media is almost everything in elections because when you go in to vote, there's only a name and your brand is everything, right? And so CNN, and remember, CNN was run by Jeff Zucker. And Jeff Zucker used to run NBC when they greenlit and produced The Apprentice starring Donald Trump. And remember that Zucker knew that Donald Trump had 6 bankruptcies and was a complete and utter loser. He built a mirage of a really successful businessman for the purposes of good ratings for that NBC reality show, full well knowing that he was not only pumping up a guy who was a total failure in business, but was also a grotesque human being. Everyone who knew Trump at the time would say, oh, he's terrible, including Tucker Carlson. That's another story that's in the news today. Everybody knew he's a terrible guy. So Jeff Zucker says, yeah, I don't care. I want the money, okay? I want the money at NBC. I want the money at CNN. Moonves at CBS goes, I love money too. Let's all pump Donald Trump. And guess what? When you only talk about Donald Trump, of course Donald Trump gets elected. One last thing, Bernie Sanders, I don't have those stats in front of me, but we covered it before. In 2016, when Joe Biden was not running for president, in the lead up to that election in 2015, Joe Biden got more news coverage than Bernie Sanders did, as Bernie Sanders was closing a 50-point lead on Hillary Clinton. It was one of the most remarkable political stories of our lifetimes. And they refused to cover Bernie Sanders almost under penalty of law. Okay, so when you have a monster like Donald Trump sucking up all of the airtime, and they won't even talk about Bernie Sanders, gee, I wonder why 2016 turned out the way that it did. Because if you talk about Bernie, he talks about how corporations are screwing us. What are these entities making these decisions? Giant multinational corporations, okay? And so they don't want the anti-corporate message of Bernie Sanders. Donald Trump is a con man, and he'll give people whatever they want as long as you play ball with him. So they think Donald Trump is good for ratings, and he'll give corporations tax cuts and everything, which he did. So they promote him, they bury Bernie Sanders. Back to Bill Burr. The second thing, I don't want you to lose track of this. Not only is he right about the cable news coverage, especially in the 2016 election, but his vitriol towards mainstream media is even more correct, because for their own agenda, they're brainwashing you. So we talk about the cult of Trump, and that definitely exists, right? But the original cult is mainstream media telling you corporate rule is awesome, the status quo is wonderful, and you should trust the establishment and all these corporate politicians. And so when you got brave comics like Bill Burr saying, no, don't believe the hype. Obviously, it reminds me of George Carlin, and they're both right. And that's why The Daily Show did so well, because you need the comedians to tell you, because the news people are fake. I mean, it's in a lot of ways it's true. They're either fake towards corporate rule or they're fake towards Donald Trump and his personal corruption. So everybody, tyt.com/polls. It is super interesting whether you continue to cover the atrocities of Donald Trump going forward, or you try not to. And remember, if we stop, it doesn't mean CNN is gonna stop. And so that's why it's even more complicated.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, how do you rebut the lies coming from right-wing media? Because they're gonna continue doing their thing. So it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. But I will say, just on a very personal level, I know not everyone agrees with this, Trump stories are super boring. That coup story from yesterday, I didn't want to do it. But Cenk finds it interesting. He has stuff to say about it. For me, it's like, oh, a bunch of generals decided to stay quiet during the Trump administration, and now they're trying to sell a bunch of books, and they're saying that they were worried about another coup.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.